All right, guys, welcome to the Ravit show. And yes, here we are again early this week. It's usually Friday or Thursday, but this time it had to be on Tuesday. Can't wait to welcome my guest today, Keith McCormick. I've been waiting for this session since a long because he's one of the instructors on LinkedIn and creates a lot of many courses on LinkedIn Learning. You can see the link that I've mentioned above. So yes, Keith is a little about Keith is he's an independent data miner, trainer, speaker, and author. We'll be discussing about Keith's data science journey, his courses, and definitely the books that he has authored. So there's a lot that we'll be discussing around. I hope you guys are excited. Don't forget to let me know where you're joining from. And also, not to forget that Keith is giving away 3 months of free subscription of his LinkedIn learning courses, and also giving his ebook and a 30-minute session with him. So yes, that's happening. Also, before calling in Keith, I would like to thank our partners 365 Data Science and How to Get Analytics Job by Albert and John. They're doing fantastic job. So can't wait. Let's do this. Let's have Keith on it. Hey, Keith, welcome to the Ravit show.
Hey, I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this.
Such a pleasure, Keith. We have people joining in already. Shruti is here. Hey, Shruti. Hey, Ayush. Hey, David. Nice to see you from Israel. Amazing.
Fantastic. Already getting quite a crowd here.
Yeah. Shruti is joining from India. Jane as well. Awesome.
And I've got my
mug. Is here. Oh, yes. Keith, cheers to our conversation today. Looking forward. And yes, this is happening. Manpreet is here. Okay. Hello, Ravit. You're from Georgia, US. Okay. I don't know LinkedIn user. Please do not forget to put your name so we know who it is. Yeah, exactly. You shouldn't miss out. But Keith, I was just telling them before you joined in that we'll be giving, you're giving away 3 months of LinkedIn learning subscription, your ebooks, and a 30 minutes live session, one each. So which are these books? Can you just let us know quickly, and then we'll obviously dive into it.
Well, I went to the bookshelf and I grabbed the stack here. The thing about the books, I'm very proud of these books, and you notice there's a packed book there, but there's also a Wiley book and so on. So, in fact, the one on the bottom, this was the first one some time ago, but the one that I want to mention, people probably notice that they're mostly SPSS books. My courses are not all SPSS, but my books traditionally have been. There's kind of a beyond that, but this is the one that I think is the most interesting. I'm trying to get part of the webcam here. If perchance they don't use SPSS, because obviously if they use SPSS, it's a great book. But even if you don't use SPSS, this one is an interesting one because it gets into a lot of the statistics theory and topics that you don't find in other books, to be honest. Some really interesting stuff. So if someone discovers that they've won one of the books or they're excited about the books, that would be the one I think you'd want to check out.
Awesome. We'll be diving more into it, and we'll be knowing more about your books. But yeah, definitely just a quick heads up, people who join in, y'all can ask questions to Keith, as many as y'all wish to, because Keith is here to answer, and we'll be talking a lot about his LinkedIn courses. I've mentioned the link above, so you can have a look quickly and ask him questions around it. So yeah, Shruti says the books looks interesting. Awesome. But before going ahead, Keith, for the audience, can you just introduce yourself? What do you do? Where you come from? And what are we going to discuss today?
Sure. So I'm a trainer and a consultant, and lately I've been working with leaders of analytics teams. I've kind of moved into the analytics leadership space more and more over the recent years. But I started out as a software trainer back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. I bet you can guess what software. I was a software trainer. That's why the books are all SPSS. I was thinking about grad school in the late 90s. I was in my late 20s. I was just shy of 30, and I was thinking about graduate school. and I got a chance to teach introductory SPSS courses. There's a whole long story behind that, but I thought that was going to be perfect because I was going to teach that 2 or 3 weeks a year during grad school and make some, it's always tough to have a little bit of pocket money in grad school. That was the plan. Next thing you know, I was teaching SPSS probably almost 50 weeks a year. Obviously, no time left for school, so it became a career. So between the winter of 97, 98 and last March, I was almost never home. That's a lot of years that I was gone. Exactly. I was gone. I was only home a few weeks, handful of weeks a year, all those years. And I did the software training really quite intensively for more than 10 years, more like 15 probably. And then my career shifted more to consulting. Really around the time that IBM bought SPSS, which was 2009, which was still quite a while ago now. I mean, that was like 12 years ago. I had already started consulting, but it really shifted, and it started to become more like 80% of my time was consulting, and only 10 or 20% of my time was training back then. So I've done a variety of things.
Oh, that's a lot of things which you've done, and yes, we were just talking before we just came in live that 85% of the time you were out and not at home. Considering the background that you had in your mug, and we were just having a discussion around it, can you just tell us more about this 85% of the time that you've spent outside? Obviously, it's you've been training and all of those things, but what was the experience like, and how does this COVID affect you?
Well, the quick version on the COVID is that I haven't been on a plane since March of 2020, and I've never gone that long. I'm the kind of person who runs out of passport pages before the 10 years, and I don't know how
exactly
in all the countries, but you get the 10-year passport, and I have to get the extra thick one. I don't have my passport here handy to show you, but I always run out of that beforehand. So it was just constant travel, but it was a little bit different over the years. So for that first 10 years or so, it was almost all domestic travel, and I would go to where SPSS would have a big office. So I would go to Chicago, and then New York, and then Atlanta, and then Dallas, and then LA, and kind of like start all over again. It was just a lot of domestic travel, but it was a lot of fun. Very much enjoyed it. And then about 15 years ago, and I tell this story in the Side Hustle course, maybe more than 15 years ago now, it's hard to remember. I got approached by a conference organizer in Kuala Lumpur, and they said, "Do you want to come to Malaysia and teach a data science workshop for a whole week?" And I was like, well, that sounds really interesting, actually, because I had never been to KL at that point. But I actually did it for about 5 years running. That conference organizer started to move into other topics, but that was a lot of fun. So pretty much nonstop domestic travel. I mean, we're talking about 10 weeks at a time. I wouldn't be home, more than 10. More than 10. I mean, 10 weeks was not unusual at all. So you learn how to do it, and you learn all the things about business travel. It was really part of my job, but then much more international travel for the last 15, and that's really been enjoyable. And I think we associate data science probably with the big FANG companies now, Facebook, and Alphabet, and so on. And those jobs probably aren't travel jobs. But when I started out, the kind of data science I was doing, it was very much a travel job, and that's one of the things that I enjoyed about it, and one of the reasons I chose to keep on doing that and not do grad school.
Yeah, I think that is some experience. And talking about that experience, that brings me to a question that is around data science. What you've had, you've looked at data science 10 years back, and you look at data science today. What do you feel about it, Keith? What's the difference, and how do you, people have that question all the time where they're like, how should we get into data science? What was back then, 10 years back, and how do you say it looks like now?
Well, I want to acknowledge Robert's question too, because he's asked a related one, and that is that, since I started out in statistics software training, do we emphasize statistics as much now, and has that changed? And I think that's a really good one, and it ties into your question perfectly, I think, because
Data
Back
analytics.
when I was starting out, one of the reasons that I did contemplate graduate work is that I felt at the time that if I didn't have at least a master's in statistics, that was going to limit me career-wise. That would no longer be the case. Now, I'm not suggesting that all the data scientists out there should be getting PhDs in statistics. That would be kind of crazy advice when you think about it, because now we have degree programs in data science. However, has the pendulum swung so far in the other direction that we don't emphasize statistics enough? I would say yes, unfortunately.
Okay.
It's probably only 10 or 15% of the job, but it's an important 10 or 15%. And I think we probably have de-emphasized it a little bit too much. And I have a theory as to, well, there's a lot of reasons why it's happened, but one of them in particular, I think, is that I think in undergraduate settings, what's happened is taking an R programming course in some cases becomes a substitute for a statistics theory course. Like you might have a theory course that leads on to other theory courses, but somebody might take an R course. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with R, but the problem would be, what if you take that one course, only one, and that one course is mostly about the coding, and you kind of never really get around to the theory, and the next thing you know, you're learning about XGBoost and ensemble methods and stuff. A lot of times I think people never kind of go back to the basics. And here's the primary thing, the primary mistake that I think people make. So Robert, I think you can see why I jumped at your question right away, because it's something I feel strongly about. I think the mistake that people make is they trust their data too much. Statisticians are constantly trained to say, wow, is there something about the provenance of the data? Is there something about where the data came from that has distorted the story that the data is trying to tell me? Statisticians are extremely sensitive to that. And I think those that maybe learn machine learning first and don't pick up as much stats, sometimes just kind of assume if you have all the data that the story's in there, but you never have all the data, because there's always processes that are filtering or selecting or diverting that data, and you have to understand where the data is coming from. And I just find that people that have been trained heavily in stats might want to spend dozens of hours on that, and sometimes folks that haven't been as heavily trained in stats spend like a half hour worrying about that, and that's about it. And I think sometimes it's not enough.
Yeah, I think where this actually makes a lot of sense to me, where get into something and make sure that you're doing it the best. Don't divert towards different things. That's what I can see. We had an interesting question from a student, UN Champ. Okay. Hey kid, I'm a student who is just deciding to make my path towards a career, and would love to know your thoughts on how I can start with data science as a career. Wow.
Well, big question, obviously, but I do have a lot of thoughts on this. Something that folks might not know about me is that I teach for UC Irvine's extension program. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how to sequence the courses and what the course requirements should be and so on. So here is my advice for UN Champ. Yeah, looking for the name. We're going to have to use their profile name in this case. What I would say is that usually when people are starting out, they engage in a behavior sometimes that's a bit like market timing. When people were trying to figure out what's the hot stock to buy, in the stock market. But the sense in which young data scientists sometimes do this is they try to figure out what is the technology that I want to emphasize and master that technology, because if I just master the technology, I'll be all set. Well, as recently as 5 years ago, they might have decided R. And now Python has completely overtaken R. I don't think there's any doubt. But, if you're an undergrad, you're starting out in your career, you don't have that 5 or 10 or 15 or 25, or some of my colleagues, 35 year context that shows you that the technologies change and evolve over time. So whatever you seek out to do, make sure that you're learning not just the technology, but there's some theory and concept coverage in whatever program you choose.
Yeah.
Make sure that it's there. Make sure that the people that are teaching the material are actual practitioners. This probably seems like obvious advice, but what can happen sometimes in a program, particularly if it's a university program, you'll run into this every once in a while, is they have a statistician teach the stats class and they have a computer scientist teach the machine learning class, and they have an IT person teach the big data class, but possibly none of the three of them have field experience actually building models at a bank or for a manufacturer and so on, right? So you're left to figure out the business stuff on your own. So you want to watch out for that. So you want to be taught by people that have actually done this in the field. It's great if they're an academic too, but an academic that also consults or something like that, Don't overly focus on just the technology at the expense of everything else, and make sure that someone teaches you something about the process. So I'm a fan of CRISP-DM, the cross-industry standard practice for standard process rather for data mining. And that's taught in a couple of my courses. AWS has their own and Microsoft has their own now. They come up with different versions. But someone has to teach you the process and make sure that it's someone that has actually used that process in a real project.
I think makes sense. Talking about, the languages in the programming, there was a question from Ravjot, the Google. What's your first programming language you learned?
This is funny because it underscores my point though, because when I start talking about the programming languages that I first learned, it's almost embarrassing, because this is stuff that is so old. So hopefully I don't look old enough to have started out on COBOL. But folks that are just 10 years older than me, I'm early 50s. Folks that are just 10 years older than me would have learned COBOL and punch cards. That's how quickly everything has changed. So to answer your question, it's actually kind of a fun one. So when I was a kid, like middle school, I had a Commodore 64, and think about the implications think about the memory that we used to have. And these, it's not, in other words, not nearly as powerful as the Apple Watch that I just got to wear on my wrist, right? Not nearly as powerful as that. But I learned BASIC, right? So I taught myself in BASIC. But then when I was an undergrad, my introductory courses that were just programming, they weren't really computer science courses. They were just the learn the code. Those were all in Pascal, which interestingly enough just celebrated its 50th birthday. I just saw an article in the magazine of the Association of Computing Machinery. Folks might know that organization because they run the big KDD conference, which attracts 5,000 people, from all over the world. Yeah. So I belong to the organization that runs that conference, and they just had a cover story or something. I was just reading their monthly magazine, and Pascal just celebrated a 50th anniversary. But the other language that you'll all get a kick out of is Lisp, L-I-S-P. I imagine that everybody's heard of it. When people are making a joke about it, they say that it stands for lots of silly parentheses, but that's, of course, not really the name. But that's about 50 years old now, too. And if you know the XKCD cartoon, it's kind of a fun cartoon. They just had a cartoon celebrating Lisp. So, so basically knowledge of those languages is useless now, which is my point. Python is here to stay. It's going to be with us for many, many years. Python came out in my college graduation year in 91, but it's really only within the last 5 years or so that it's been associated with machine learning, because it was a general purpose programming language before that. But my point is that languages come and go. And if it's not the language, even if it's Python, it might be the library within Python that changes. So you're going to need to know things that haven't been invented yet. So don't obsess over trying to figure out what language is the language to learn and that you'll be set for the rest of your career. Expect to use 2 or 3 or 4 at any given moment, and every 5 years you're going to have to learn all over again. That's just the way it is.
Wow, that's fantastic, because what I see is in the last 50 years you might have evolved with 10 other languages too, which you have learned, and you're still learning the new ones which are coming in. Like yeah, I think that is something very interesting. Also, talking about one interesting question here by Manpreet. Hey, Kate, my question is, as Kate, you have a course named the Non-Technical Skills of Effective Data Scientist. What are your thoughts on what skills generally data scientists lack? What are the non-tech skills they should focus on? What are the three questions. So yeah, what are the three top?
Okay, I love this question. I may opt not to just kind of list three because I want to kind of elaborate more on the mindset. Okay, so
Yeah.
here's the trick with non-technical is that sometimes when people hear about that, I think it resonates with everybody that that it's important. But I think a lot of times folks think, oh, well, these are like everyday business skills. Somewhat true, but it's how those business skills are applied in these particular settings. So another reason why I think you really have to understand the process, you have to understand what machine learning is doing to help the organization. So for instance, will my model produce return on investment? So sometimes I think something as probably as obvious perhaps to say, but that we don't always think to do, is to get familiar with the kind of business terms that our internal customers use all the time.
Right.
Like the way people will write millions and things like that. I mean, it's almost one of the things that's great about being a LinkedIn Learning author is that I check out kind of these MBA type, stuff, and even things like accounting and all these different areas, because I think you have to remember that you're not building these models for the sake of building models. We're not mathematicians. We're applied mathematicians, really. We're trying to solve business problems with this. So you have to have a pretty good appreciation of what the internal customer needs to get out of this model. You also have to understand things like how, the folks on the marketing team that might be working on some kind of campaign response model with you have very different backgrounds than the IT team. And I think we sometimes assume that all these departments talk easily to each other, but they often don't. So so one day you're talking to the IT team and you're talking almost a completely different language the next day when you're talking to the marketing team, who's going to be your internal customer. So it's really quite specific to data science, and it's developing this ability to basically act as this intermediary or this translator between these different teams. And that's why you can't just read some, business self-help book, as valuable as that can be, about being a good communicator and so on. We're really talking about skills that are quite specific to data science, but that are the business side of data science.
Wow. I think, yes, definitely that answers Manpreet's question.
Yep.
And a lot about the course. So I would actually want to quickly, share this, my screen, and would want to show folks about what Manpreet has just asked about the course.
Oh, that's a great idea, because then, yeah.
So this is the one.
Yep. That's the one. Yep. And you can see I've done quite a few there, but we picked out these three that would be the most interesting to do. Yeah, you could even go into everybody is able to see the table of contents there. I don't know if some folks are on their phone, it's probably hard to read, that small print. But
everyone can,
for instance, one of the chapters, one of the videos is on skepticism. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is really this bit that's kind of inspired by statistics training, but is kind of developing this sense of, hey, the data seems to be telling me X, but my business experience tells me that that's really surprising, and how to figure out if what the data is telling you is real or not real. There's a technical aspect to that, but the non-technical aspect to it is kind of developing this confidence to be bold, that you do sometimes have to go to the person who's provided the data to you and say, something doesn't quite seem right. And you sometimes have to go all the way through the whole process. Where did the data begin? Then what happened to it? And then what happened to it? And then what happened to it? And that requires a lot of walking around in big buildings, knocking on doors, and asking people who probably don't even know who you are to chat for 5 minutes so that you can start to resolve the issue about what's going on. And a lot of data scientists just are for a lot of reasons, they're just reluctant to leave their desk and go talk to these other folks. It's like, this is the data I was given. This is the data I'm going to analyze. It's not my fault. It's my responsibility. I have to analyze the data that was given to me. It's not my job to go running around. But I argue, of course, that it is everybody's job to go running around.
Wow. And I see something very interesting here, Keith, that is diplomacy. Uh, can you just throw some light on how diplomacy can be helpful in business?
Sure. So this, I don't think people are going to be surprised that sometimes when you're trying to do a big project that people will get, upset or anxious or worried or things like that. What folks might not realize when they're just starting out in their career is that this happens on every single project. Every single project will have organizational resistance. I've never been on a project. I've never even heard of a project where there was zero organizational resistance. So what do I mean by that? When this model is done and it's deployed, it's going to help drive decisions. So whatever way was the old way of making decisions is somehow being changed. And somebody within the organization is not going to be in favor of that change. Even if the change might produce profit for the company, maybe it might be desirable in a lot of ways. Organizations are filled with people. And all these various people have points of view and they have needs. So what will happen is there'll be somebody whose job is altered in a way that they would prefer that it not be altered. That's affected by this model. So the skill of diplomacy is really trying to figure out who are those people that will be affected. Who among them thinks they might be negatively affected, and how to seek them out and involve them early. So you're not just working on this model and ignoring their needs and then dumping the model on the organization, and all of a sudden these people are upset and they've never had an opportunity to voice their concerns. So again, it's not just be nice is useful, is life advice. It's really specific to the art of data science, right?
Yeah, I think that is one skill that I think everyone needs when having a business. I had an interesting question from Shruti. Okay, Keith, I'm from a different background and trying to get into data science field. So what's your advice I should keep in mind when it comes to internships and job? Interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. So I think the trick might be, we might want to ask a follow-up question if we can. Well, actually, Shruti, you can just listen to me and then maybe put in the feed. Knowing the background that you're coming from is interesting because, I just happened to use marketing as an example. So let's just say, I'm going to make this up because I don't know. Let's say, for instance, that you have a background that has included some marketing analytics or social media or something like that, right? So somebody in that position might encounter a data scientist because the marketing team, again, is acting as an internal customer for that work. In other words, there's so many jobs, dozens of them. There are so many jobs that interact with the data science team. So I think the best way to do it is to seek out opportunities to interface with the data science team in your current role and basically go to your boss and say, hey, I want to be the contact person. I want to be the contact person from marketing that is interfacing with the data science team. Or if you have, I'll make a second guess. Let's say you're IT, but there are a lot of folks that are in IT or business intelligence that get interested in data science. They can volunteer to be in a role that's often called the data steward. In other words, the expert of what's in the data warehouse that can support the building of machine learning models. So again, you go to your boss in IT and say, hey, I want to continue working for you. I want to continue to be on this team, but I want to volunteer to be the person that helps the data science team find the data that they need within the data warehouse. Now, I'm not suggesting that the data science team doesn't know how to pull data and so on. They almost all do, but they don't have the permissions that the IT team has for that data. There's always some interfacing going on. So that's the main thing that I would do is I would, in your current role, whatever it is, whether it's currently an academic role or currently in business, seek out ways to participate in a project. And that, I think, is the best first step, because then you have that to me is even more powerful than doing something like competing in a Kaggle competition, as amazing as that can be. Because what you've done is you've learned the people side of the job too. And I think that's a powerful story to tell during an interview.
Oh wow, that's like a more practical end, where you're working and you're not looking at something which are theoretical and maybe just getting into courses. Rather, you're just out there and doing the job which will be required for you to do maybe when you get a job. So that is definitely helpful. And there was a follow up question which was from Shruti herself, and she asked, which is your best course for beginners in ML?
Oh, I would say if you're starting from scratch. I just gave the advice, and that's a wonderful follow-up, Shruti. I just gave the advice that people can obsess over technology, right? So I'm not going to say, take in our class or a Python class. There are lots of fantastic ones in the library. But I would say that the Essential Elements course, which I think was on our agenda to talk about today, I think that's the one, because what it does is it talks about the things that you'll encounter on a real-world project. But from that general audience point of view, right? So it's not just saying what the steps are. It's kind of giving you, it's my hope is that if you finish a course like this, you feel like you've gone through a project. But again, from the total context, the point of view of the business people, the point of view of the modelers, and so on. So it's walking you through steps like, what's the very first thing that you have to figure out? You go off looking for data. What should you be looking for? What characteristics does that data have to meet? And I keep that one pretty brisk because I'm trying to cover the entire project from start to finish. So it's not a detailed step-by-step course, but it's a high-level, get your sea legs, as they say, right? So to get oriented. So I think in answer to that question, where do I start? That's where, and by the way, I've discovered that some MBA programs actually assign it as homework, which I thought was fantastic. And when I heard that, I said, well, that's really great. I'm so glad that they found that course, because that's exactly what they should be doing for that audience. So for a new practitioner, for their boss, or for somebody like an MBA student, all of those audiences have their needs met by the Essential Elements. And I think that's why my most popular course, because some of the other courses are really much more specific. Yeah.
Definitely, that helps, Shruti. And there was an interesting question around, very relative question from Matthew. A quick question for you, Kate. What are the top 5 techniques you would recommend to a newcomer in machine learning?
Okay. Yeah. No. This is an interesting one. Okay. So the top 2 are going to be way beyond the others, and then I'll give you some others that would be the kind of ones that would be like in 3rd, 4th, or 5th place. But the top 2, without question, linear regression and decision trees. And I know that makes me seem so old school, right? But let's start with regression. There's a reason why I'm emphasizing this. Now, you could learn the basics of regression. In fact, many of you probably know the basics of regression already as I say this, so you might be surprised that I'm even suggesting it. But when I say learn regression, I mean really learn regression. So, things like multicollinearity, variance inflation factor, tolerance, just random things that you may have heard of, the difference between R squared and adjusted R squared and so on. So why do I go on and on about all this stuff? Oh, another huge one is interaction terms within regression. But the thing is, if you do a regression book or a course in regression, I actually have one in the library. Actually, yeah, you could even call that up. That wasn't one of the ones we were going to talk about, but if you call that up, this thing is 4 hours on just regression. You would think, what is there to say about regression that takes that long? Well, when I was contemplating grad school, I was trying to get the prerequisites out of the way. So I took the introductory, so it was an introductory stats course, but it was an introductory stats course for psychology grad students. So it already assumed that you knew quite a bit of stats, but that's what it was. It was 10 months. There was the part 1 and a part 2, 10 months on just regression. So there's so much there. So why would we care, right? Again, everybody must be thinking, Keith, are you suggesting we're actually going to use regression as going to be our model at the end of our project? Probably not. But you can't understand neural nets unless you understand regression. You really can't, because all neural net is a fancy regression. Now, it's very fancy regression, but that kind of underscores the whole point. So, and then you also can't understand all the variations on the neural net theme. The quick version is you can't really understand what the hidden layer is doing unless you understand how regression handles polynomials and interactions. And that's as far down that technical rabbit hole I'm going to go. As far as decision trees go, it's the same thing. You can't understand something like XGBoost unless you understand ensemble methods in general. And you can't understand ensemble methods in general unless you understand how one model gets combined with a bunch of models into an ensemble. So absolutely top two is linear regression and decision trees. And then after that, probably cluster analysis as the classic example of supervised learning. You really do kind of have to understand ensemble methods these days, I think, and then neural nets. So top two, linear and decision trees, without a doubt. And then ensembles, neural nets, and cluster analysis.
Great answer there, Keith. Also, since we were talking about programming languages, I missed out on many comments from folks where I'm just looking at Robert's. He said we love COBOL.
Yay, COBOL! Yeah. I just got an email, by the way, Robert, and everybody else that is a fan of the older technologies. Oh, COBOL, Pascal, Fortran, Smalltalk. Oh, yeah, you got some of those I've heard of but never used. But Fortran, Fortran was really big when I was taking classes in Pascal. I'm not quite sure. It's really, sometimes it can be a matter of like a 2-year difference, and the introductory computer science professors will switch, change their minds. Yeah, it's really something.
Oh. Okay, there's another question from Neeraj Satpal. Keith, do you reckon Python has played in big role in democratization of data science, and it does not need to be solely the realm of corporate IT?
This is interesting because I haven't thought about that. We might have to have a follow-up question. I think what's amazing about Python is, one, I think that Guido van Rosen did a great job with designing it. I think it's very elegant. I think basics are easy to learn. It's a brilliant language. So, if we were asking this question in reverse like 10 years ago, would I have anticipated that Python would have completely dominated the machine learning space? I'm not sure I would have, because the libraries weren't there. So, Niraj, I think your question is coming from a different point of view. Are you basically suggesting that now Python is expanding again, and pretty much in IT, all the ML ops and so on is anticipated to be Python? I don't think people would have drawn that conclusion even as recently as a couple of years ago. But if that's what you're seeing out there, it certainly doesn't shock me. Here's my quick response. I've already said that these technologies change quicker than we think. So trying to decide what horse to bet on is kind of a tough thing. But I think that people worry too much about compatibility, because this is what I see that makes me nervous. You get somebody. I've always been an SPSS guy, but here in town, here where I live in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, we're very much in SAS country, and some folks might be familiar with SAS, the huge, international statistics software company. They were dominant in healthcare analytics for years. So when I discover that somebody that's been a 25-year veteran of their industry, and they get turned down during the interview, they're, let's say my age or something like that, or even older with even more experience, and they get turned away because they can't do a Python quiz, during the HR step. I just think that's nuts, because it's really not that hard to build a model in something like SAS, let's say, and then deploy it in Python. So this notion that everybody has to use the same tool, I think if it's taken to extreme, there's the old saying, it's the tail wagging the dog, and that's the concern. So if it's an obsession with compatibility, then I get a little bit nervous. But Python's a fantastic language, so the fact that it's as attractive to the IT team as it is to the data science team doesn't surprise me. But again, I don't know if we got to follow up with Niraj.
I think just a follow-up question from Neeraj himself. Other domain experts like can and should be trained is using Python to fix the problems that they face on a daily basis. So will that be something which will be fixed. Yep.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's going to happen, Niraj, is that there's so much momentum behind Pascal right now, is that the younger generation is all going to be familiar with it. So, but you know what? When I was learning Pascal, again, in these introductory classes, I wasn't doing anything elaborate with Pascal, certainly, but, that was thought of as like a teaching language at the time. Python certainly does not have that reputation. I think what's going to happen is it's going to, if there's a concern there about everybody having some familiar with Python, it seems like it's already happening, because it absolutely dominates. I think there's a real consensus that if somebody's going to do like a data science master's, they're going to learn Python during the data science master's period, right? That, there's really no debate. So the number of people competent in Python is going to increase, on its own. But I appreciate that George kind of gave me a hallelujah on the, you can take it too far. I assume that's what George was referring to. Yeah.
Yep. So another question from Murad. Murad has a question that is on SPSS. Okay. Oh, cool. Assuming your last 2 years of experience, which one of the following helped you a lot? The enterprise software packages such as Modeler or open source programming, in which case you guess SPSS Modeler doesn't help and it would be better to use Python, R, or etc.
Well, Murad, thank you for the question. So I'm so reluctant to say this, especially in a public forum, but it's been increasingly hard to get SPSS Modeler trials and just kind of try it out for size. So I've been increasingly using Nime. I'm obviously not using it for coffee today, but I've got my Nime mug, right? Wow. And the reason I'm a fan, I've become such a fan of Nime, even though my first book, and it still sells, I wrote came out in 2013. This book. I'm obviously a huge fan of Modeler. I always will be. I don't know if people know this, but the cover photo here was contributed by Colin Shear, who invented SPSS Modeler back in the in the early 90s, and he wrote the foreword, which was very kind of him to do. So I'm a huge fan. I always will be. But getting access to it in the workplace has gotten more difficult over time. So for that reason. That, by the way, has not happened so much for SPSS statistics. SPSS statistics is easy to get. It's much more, affordable, but Modeler is a little bit tougher. So I have been suggesting when people are just starting out, they're just trying to figure out what's going on, you need something to practice in. I've been recommending Nime. But when you're starting to look for your career job, we've seen so many comments today regarding this. Python really is king right now as far as hiring and contributing to teams and so on. But all the surveys say you got to know 3, 4, 5 tools. So you can't just choose one. Also, by the way, tools like Nime tend to be very compatible with Python. You can mix and match. I don't know if people know that. So you can have Python code and insert it in a Nime process. You can also do that with R. So if you have a team, some of which know R, some of which know Python, but the newbies need a way to contribute to, you could conceivably have work that have been written by R programmers, Python programmers, and Nime users all together in the same process, which would be very helpful for deployment. I know that's an elaborate answer, but the technology piece always gets complicated.
I think that is definitely very super insightful, Keith. There was a question around about the courses, Trijendra Swinet. Okay, is there any course for basics of stats which can be referred? Okay.
Well, one of the things that I love about the LinkedIn Learning Library and being an author is that I get access to the library. So I check out a lot of these courses on my own, and sometimes they're skills that I'm already familiar with, but I want to see if they're well presented. So basic stats, I believe, is quite well represented in the LinkedIn Learning Library, and my courses are often featured in learning paths that have these introductory courses and so on. So the most basic stats course that I have in the library is my regression course, which again I recommend. But if you're absolutely brand new to stats, you should probably take, I think there's Statistics Fundamentals Part 1, 2, and 3. You could probably watch just the Statistics Fundamentals Part 1 and then watch my regression course, and that would be pretty good.
Awesome. Awesome. So, quick question here, Kate. So, are these courses free for the premium folks as well? People can have access to your courses?
Yeah, there's more than one kind of LinkedIn membership. So what? I wish I was enough of an expert on the memberships that I could definitively tell people, right? But what you want to do is you want to log into your LinkedIn, and if it's anything like the face I see when I visit LinkedIn, there is a play button, just on your phone or DVD player or whatever in the upper right-hand corner, and click on it, and you're either invited to do a trial or you're not invited to do a trial. If you're invited to do a trial, then it looks like you don't have it. But if it doesn't tell you start your trial now, then you've already got it, and it might be that you're already out. For instance, I just got a Apple Watch a couple of days ago because AT&T was making a promotion that happens to be my carrier, and the guy that helped me with my Apple Watch was explaining that AT&T gives all of their employees LinkedIn Learning, and I bet some of them don't know that. So and it would be so fun if this was true. Please leave this in the comments, everybody, if you discover this. If you discover, based on clicking on that play button, that you had access to LinkedIn Learning and didn't realize that you had access to it. I think we have enough people on the call. There's a chance that there's one person or more out there where that's the case, where you have this awesome benefit that either your school or your work have given you and you didn't know it was there.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yes, that I think that was something which I didn't try myself, though I'm a premium account holder, so I might have it. But yes, since I was able to access your courses, so yes, definitely I have it. And that reminds me of something where obviously for the folks who have already been asking questions, definitely you'll be winning a 3-month free subscription that Keith is giving. And also one of his ebooks that he's offering, you can choose out of the 3, I guess. Yes, if that's right, Kate.
Yep.
Yes, and 30-minute session.
George's comment. George, if you don't mind sharing with the group what employer.
Wow. I think George works for. If you're
comfortable sharing that, because just to say that, how common is this out there? I know that. If I'm not mistaken, was it UT Austin? Yeah, I think so. I think UT Austin, because I may do a workshop for them at some point. I don't teach in that program, but anyway, just a conversation that I had that I might do a workshop at some point. And if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing here. If I'm not mistaken, UT Austin provides it to the students in that data science program. Yep. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so in Georgia's university setting. Yep, fantastic. Yeah. So you get the corporate folks sometimes that get it for free, as well as a number of universities.
Wow, awesome. So yes, people can benefit out of it. Okay, Shruti has a question here. I'm doing machine learning research internship. Do you think it will make a difference on my resume? And she did follow up saying that she is doing business administration. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's fantastic. So again, that example of kind of being the internal customer and volunteering to be the interface, with the data science team. Yeah. No, I think absolutely. If I was interviewing somebody, and they could tell me just one story, just one, a machine learning project from conception to deployment, and the journey along the way, that would have tremendous influence, on me. So I think, if you could participate. Now, ideally, there's one caution about this though, is that, and those of us that have ever helped organize an internship in a business setting, on the employer side, can appreciate this. Not everybody does it well, right? So, everybody has their heart in the right place, I'm sure, when they do this, but a lot of times companies will invite interns in and really not give them the tasks so you want to shop around, is what I'm saying, for your internship, because If you get the sense that the internship is doing nothing but model building the whole time, and you're never invited to meetings, and you never get to listen in on the conception and the planning and the data exploration and so on, but instead you're just sat down at your desk and you're given the data and you basically are left alone and said, build me a model and I'll come back in a month and see how you're doing, right? If the internship is only about modeling and isn't about the whole process, then I wouldn't be that excited about it.
Yeah. Superb. I think, yes. One quick question from my end, Keith. According to you, how important are courses and books? I know obviously courses are important. That's why you've created courses for folks. But how important it is to upskill, and how often these courses and books have helped you in your journey to make it and give it a direction, and it has helped you?
Okay. Well, the volume of professional development that I do might be either surprising or shocking, depending on people's point of view. So I'm fortunate at this stage in my career that I get invited to give, keynotes and workshops and so on. Okay. So everybody's busy, I know. And I happen to be, single without kids, partly because I was never home for 20 years, but the reason I bring this up is because if I give a talk on a Monday, even compared to some of my colleagues, I'm more likely to stay the whole week. If the conference is like a Sunday through Thursday conference or something, and I'm teaching a half-day workshop on the Monday, or I'm teaching all day on Monday and Tuesday, or whatever it might be, I can't do it every single time, but I'll often stay the entire conference, because as a speaker, and I talk about this in the Side Hustle course, is that one of the things about being invited to be a speaker is usually you're just given a pass to attend the rest of the conference. And it's crazy not to leverage that. Now, again, life intervenes. Some consultants are, perhaps so busy, or they've got family obligations that, they can't do it. Yeah. So I probably spend about a month a year, every year, and I've been doing that forever, a month, sitting in on other people's classes, sometimes reading, somebody's given a keynote and I'll sit in on the keynote and then I'll read their whole book. This is just constant, and it's at least 4 weeks a year, and probably more.
Wow. But now I know why 85% of the time you're just out and you're attending conferences, talking.
Because I wasn't coming home. Exactly. Yeah. So I might only be doing a 2-day workshop that week, but I would stay the whole time and then fly. I think this is why I kept my sanity all those years, because I would fly on a Sunday morning. In other words, I'd be in Vegas for a conference for a couple of days, but I'd stay the whole week, and then I would fly the next week and do it again. But that's what allowed me to have all that professional development time. So it has never stopped. And I'm probably even busier with professional development this year than I have been for years, because I've been doing some work with a company I'm affiliated with called Cloud Factory. I've been providing internal training and presenting. Actually, I do a LinkedIn Live for them once a month that people could check out. So follow Cloud Factory. But the reason that I mention this is that they're working in areas that are new and exciting. I mean, this is data annotation, this is autonomous vehicles, computer vision, all kinds of exciting areas, which weren't around when I was playing around with Pascal, or some of our colleagues here on the call were playing around with COBOL, right? When none of us were doing that kind of stuff in the 90s.
Right. And you were just talking about the side hustle course. Actually, I would want to know more about this course, because side hustle strategies for data science and analytics experts is, I think it is very interesting. Can you tell us more about it? I'll just quickly open. Yep, here it is. Wow. And
yeah, sure. So, I don't know if people really understand what the process is of developing these courses, because it's really quite amazing, and it takes about 8 months. So what you do is you establish a relationship with a content editor, or what in the book world might be called an acquisitions editor. In other words, you make a pitch, because the thing about LinkedIn Learning is it's carefully curated. It's not just a marketplace, like Udemy, and there's some good stuff on Udemy. But the thing about this is you're generally invited You're generally invited because you've already written a book or because you've known or because you gave a talk. So you establish a relationship with the editor and you talk about the topics. And we had a conversation about this one, and we both felt that this was really needed. So I've never really thought of myself at, I've always thought, oh, I'm here to teach regression and decision trees. But then it occurred to me, constant travel as an independent professional since 97, basically. Only occasionally have I had an employee-employer relationship over those years. 90% of that time has been me billing by the day as an independent consultant. So it occurred to me, after 25 years of doing that, I have some things to say about how I got that work and how I actually conducted the work. So I get into all kinds of things, like various options for how to invoice the clients and how to score a speaking gig. And I elaborate on that story about the Kuala Lumpur thing, like how to protect yourself, and a little bit about contracts and a little bit about agreements. And then I talk quite a bit about what it was like when I wrote this one, like how I got the contract, how I attracted my co-authors. For instance, one bit of advice that I give in the course is you might not think you're ready to write a book. You might think, oh, wow, I've only been doing this 5 years or maybe even less, or I feel like I have some expertise. I feel like I have something to share, but I don't know if a publisher would talk to me, right? There has to be somebody on the call today that feels that way. Well, there's a couple of things you can do. You can reach out to a more experienced person to co-author with, where you contribute more than half of the work and they contribute more than half of the reputation, right? You can do kind of an exchange that way. Or you can volunteer to be a technical reviewer. And what a technical reviewer does is they're like a beta tester for the book. Technical books have to be checked. You have to check to see that the code works, right? And so on, right? So somebody had to do that. And then you don't have your name on the cover usually if you're a technical reviewer, but you're in there and you can put it in your LinkedIn and you can talk about that. So those are the kinds of things I talk about in Side Hustle, is the business side of being an independent consultant. If anybody out there wants to, if that's how they want to be a data scientist, you can be a data scientist that works for a company, but you can also be an independent data scientist.
This is awesome. Trust me, Kate, where you start from. I'll just read out for the folks where you start from: writing, training, conferences and consulting, and academics too. So you have all the topic areas covered, and I can see getting started with a technical reviewer. So I think, yes, definitely this is something what I don't know how many people might be going out with, but definitely this is something I might want to, check out the Side Hustle course. It looks very interesting. And before we wrap up, I have a quick question from a LinkedIn user. You can tell me your name quickly so we are known who it is. I have a question for you, Keith. At the beginning, it was business intelligence. It was big data. Now we talk about machine learning. What do you think will be the next trend?
Well, I know what I guess my answer is, but it's almost certainly deep learning, right? But what I don't want to suggest is that deep learning is replacing these other things. But in terms of the hot topic of the moment, there's no question that it's deep learning, and the reason is that if you're talking about natural language processing or computer vision or those kinds of things, those are all supported by deep learning. But the more traditional machine learning in banking and manufacturing, fraud detection and so on isn't going away. So if you're looking for what's the hot topic, I don't think there's any question that it's deep learning, but please don't take that as advice that it's all deep learning all the time, right? Because you have to put that in the proper context. However, I'll mention another topic that that might be more the 5 years out topic, and that is my role at Cloud Factory. We've been talking a lot about human in the loop, and that's how to get humans and computers working together in a very specific way. That's a topic that I've always been intrigued with, but I've really been immersed in lately, and it's just a fascinating topic. So if you're kind of looking for more things that maybe people haven't heard about, but people are going to hear more about over time, human in the loop certainly is one.
I think, yes, definitely. This is a great answer, and I think great advice. Keith, another thing, one last question from my end, definitely that is something where people can reach out to you? If they need to know more about how LinkedIn courses are built, where can they reach out to you? If they want to know more about SPSS, how can they reach out about programming languages, about everything that you do?
Okay.
Which is the best place to just get to you and understand things?
Well, I have a blog at keithmccormick.com, where I have kind of my evergreen content. But I think the number one way to stay on top of what I'm up to is to follow me on LinkedIn. So I would urge everybody to just go ahead and open up another window and just go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn right now, because that's really the best way. And from there, you can find everything else anyway. The other thing that I would urge everybody to do is that if you check out the courses, even if it's just during a trial or you win the 3 months or whatever it is, if you're in there and you're checking out courses, the best way to ask follow-up questions is this really fantastic feature that not everybody has noticed, and that's the question answer feature right inside the course. I monitor those carefully, and then you get all the students interacting there. It's a fantastic way, of doing it. So please take advantage of that. And you can even mention, say, I saw you on the Ravit show, and then I checked out the course, and here's my question, right? It would be great to know that all these different methods of outreach are
exactly
working together.
I think, definitely. I think that will help keep for you also to know where they're coming from. Another, this is for the audience actually. If since we are giving away 3 things, one is the 30 minutes session with Keith, his ebooks, and LinkedIn learning for 3 months. So whatever you guys prefer, you can just put it down in the comments that, okay, this is what I would prefer if I win. And yes, that's about it. Thank you very much, Keith, for such an insightful session. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, Ravit, one final thing though. How can they continue this conversation on where do they go to continue to post questions and comments after today?
The same thing on the same post where we are today. They can post about it. Just make sure you are tagging Keith so he can get the notification and he can answer all your questions. But definitely, whatever you're looking for, if it's a book, if it's a course or anything, do not forget to mention it. We're leaving, but we have a question. Keith, I think we can take it quickly. I don't want to miss this out from...
Oh, it's a great one. They're so new. I would love this question to be the first question of our ongoing conversation. But I think it's amazing that they exist. But I think we probably have just a small number of graduates of those PhD programs, because even 5 years ago, there were data science certificates, but data science PhDs are definitely a new thing. I'll also plug a nonprofit that's been trying to define data science, which is really great. It's iAds, and I will put the link in the comments. I'll make sure to do that.
Awesome.
There's an organization out there that's been trying to define what data science is to help programs like that come up with their curriculum.
I think this is helpful, and yes, people have already mentioned what they would love a session with you, maybe 30 minutes, LinkedIn courses. So it's kind of helpful. Nikhil says LinkedIn courses will be helpful. Okay, awesome. Nice meeting you, Keith. Amazing insights, and thank you very much for being on the Ravit show.
Thanks, everybody. I had a lot of fun. Keep the conversation going.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, cheers.
Yes, awesome. Bye-bye.